Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Self Leadership Podcast. We believe that real leadership starts with the ability of being able to lead oneself, but we also know from experience that that is not always easy. And that is why in each and every one of our episodes, we interview our guest on the top 5 practices and habits that help them in their self-leadership journey. And in today's episode, we are joined by Nicholas Heller, who both Josh and I have had the pleasure of working with in the past. Nick's impressive career spans a variety of different industries, such as media, finance, telecoms. It spans senior leadership roles at Google. But most importantly, when I think of Nick, I think of an entrepreneur through and through. Nick has successfully built and exited a variety of different businesses, and I find that he brings this entrepreneurial mindset to everything that he does. So we're particularly excited to be finding out about his top self-leadership practices. Hi, I'm very excited to jump in. My name is Anna Tsyupko, and I am the founder of Expansion Zone Coaching and the co-host of this podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by Josh Winterson, founder of Fractional TA and co-host of the podcast. And we have got our guest, Nicholas Heller. Hi, welcome.
Hi, Anna. Hi, Josh. Thanks for having me.
I'm very, very excited to have you on board today. Could you tell our listeners a bit more about yourself? Who is Nick Heller?
Well, I am a serial entrepreneur and technologist. And I guess if I could explain myself, I would say that my professional life has been very mission driven. I enjoy working on projects of real consequence with purpose that hopefully have a positive impact in the world. And I guess the idea of self-leadership and intentional living is something that I decided a long time ago that I would merge my personal and my professional lives into one and really try to manifest my own destiny. So my accent is Canadian. I was born and raised in Toronto, and I am the son of a nurse turned anthropologist in my mother and a mathematician turned epidemiologist in my father. And I suppose my background, although Canadian, is Southern European and Mediterranean through and through. And I consider myself a citizen of the world. So that's a little bit about myself. I can go into more detail if you'd like.
I love the mosaic of everything that you've just mentioned, Nick. And it would be amazing to hear, just kind of off the top of your head, what the 3 qualities are that you identify with most.
3 qualities.
Mm.
Wow, that's interesting. I suppose I identify with integrity because we leave a mark on the world, and I think we have to live not only with ourselves, but with the consequences that we have and the impact we have on others. And so I think it's important to live with integrity. The second quality that I would say would be energy, passion, enthusiasm. I think all of those mixed into one. Life is so short, and the older we get, the more we realize how short it really is. So I believe that having that exuberance for life is super important, and how I try to practice daily in how I interact with the world. And the third one, I would say it's compassion. I think we need to, we're social beings and we need to live in the world. And I think if we do so in a compassionate way, and that compassion, I'll go back to, is compassion of self, but also the compassion for others. And if we do all of those things, I think we'll be successful in that we'll surround ourselves with positive energy and happiness, and hopefully do that in our professional and personal lives.
Absolutely. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I've definitely witnessed you live all of those, especially when we were working together. And I remember getting on a call at 9 o'clock, having just woken up, and you would have already done a 20-kilometer run and already an hour and a half worth of work. And so yeah, I can definitely testify to the energy and vitality.
I probably went to bed long before you did, though, Anna. That's probably why.
Oh, who knows? Who knows? But yes, you have already touched upon your self leadership and life philosophy. But I'm just wondering, in the listener's interest, could you give a brief summary of what self leadership means to you?
I guess self leadership means a sort of constant, quiet work of self mastery, and really being able to understand your inner self, your drive, your motivation, your capabilities without the influence of the outside world. And I guess I learned early on as an entrepreneur, but also having a young family, that the stress of the world around you is always going to be there, but it's how you control yourself and how you conduct yourself that really is about self leadership and self mastery, and how you deal with that energy. And that's, I guess, what it means for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Yeah, that's it's beautiful, and it's a fantastic pathway or introduction to asking you about your first self-leadership practice that you swear by.
Well, in thinking about this, uh, I don't really have a list, but I can tell you about some of the things that I do. And one of it that we've already talked about, which is this idea of vitality and energy. So I think physicality is a really important part of my being. I started studying in university the study of movement, the study of myself through kinesiology, and I moved that to the study of the mind. And for me, being physical and present in the world, I think is a really important trait and a really important part of who I am. So, for instance, you mentioned my running. I think I have boundless amounts of energy, and I think I always have as a young child. My older sister, or my mother or father could attest to the fact that I needed to run around. And actually, if I don't run around, I don't have a sense of clarity in my mind. So for me, being physical is a moment where I can not only work on my physical strength, but I can also work on my inner strength and my mental strength. And that breeds a certain sense of confidence in me. It also gives me moments of reflection and thought when I'm doing something rhythmic and very physical. I think there's something prehistoric about that, where, you know, we probably as sapiens growing up from our early ancestors, we're very physical, and I think this is an important part of my life. So the first one I would say is physicality, and the idea of being physical in the world is both a sense of form and a sense of strength mentally that I think are very, very important to me.
Nick, just to follow up on that, you've already touched on the fact that you have a young family and your professional life is very busy. So I just wanted to drill into the kind of practicalities of this as a practice. You're running. Is this something that you do as a routine? Is it the same time every day? I'm just wondering what does this look like day to day for you as a practice?
Yeah, that's a good question, and you're going to touch on sort of other ideas that I have around how I view self leadership, and one of those is actually time. Um, I, as Anna rightfully pointed out, I'm an early riser. That's just the way that my circadian rhythms work. I tend to get sleepy early in the evening, and I am full of energy and clarity first thing in the morning. But I also find that if I don't do some physical activity, then I'm not setting my energy levels up for the rest of the day. So sometimes I may try and do some physical activity late in the day, but in the early morning, I have time to myself. My kids are asleep. My wife is asleep. It's time for me. And actually, the earlier I get up, the more I feel very accomplished doing something before my day begins. So practically speaking, I do my own work before I'm surrounded by other people. And for me, this is actually the right time to do it, and possibly the only time, because if I wait too long, my day gets away from me.
Interesting. So where possible, it sounds like it's more of a routine for you in terms of the same sort of time every day. It looks and sounds quite similar day to day. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I get up at 5:15 in the morning, and in the summertime in the UK, this is lovely because it's already sunny. In the wintertime, it's a little bit more difficult, but but that's when my alarm goes off, and generally I'm awake before my alarm goes off because my rhythm is such that my body will naturally wake up then.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And how do you approach the run itself? Do you approach running as a physical endeavor, i.e., do you think about distance? Do you think about time? Do you think about heart rate? Or do you feel like you approach it more from the mind, i.e., it's more about the fact that I'm going for the run and the run can look after itself because I know why I'm doing it?
Yeah, so running has been a lifelong passion of mine. I was a good long distance runner when I was a young man and a child. And it was a discipline that I really enjoyed. One, because I was good at it, and two, because I think that a lot of people feel they're not good at running. And there might be actually a physiological reason for that they're not good at running. But a lot of running is very mental. So there's always a moment when you're running where you want to give up. And it's a game that you play with yourself of convincing yourself not to give up and to keep going, mind over matter. And it goes back to why I switched from the study of kinesiology in university to the study of psychology, because I think that the mind is a very powerful thing. So I approach it. Sure, I have some structure to how I run and distance and faster sometimes, tempo runs, and doing some sort of speed work. But ultimately, for me, it's the rhythmic pace of running that actually is very meditative and very mental. So yes, I have somewhat of a plan and a structure, but the process of doing it and running is actually for me very meditative and very mental. And of course, over the years, I've gone from not listening to music to listening to music to being a voracious podcast listener. But in any event, I'm still alone with my thoughts and my body, and this is a very important moment for me in my day.
And final question on the running. I'm sure there are days where you cannot, for whatever reason, go and do the run. Um, I'm assuming it's not weather based because it sounds like you're quite happy to go out when it is dark and cold. But on a day where you haven't been able to get out and run, do you notice any difference in you throughout the day? And if so, what differences do you notice?
Yeah, I've well, I should say that although I'm fairly ambitious, I am somewhat of a fair weather runner. So if it's too nasty outside, I'm not going to go out. So I've started to go to the gym, which I think as you get older, it's important to do strength training for your bones and your muscles and your brain. To answer your question, I lack a sense of clarity if I don't do that in the morning. My mental focus is not the same. I don't have the same sense of calm, and that leads to emotional issues or anxiety. So for me, it's a very important moment in the day to start off with the sort of physicality of going for a run or going to the gym. And it really sets the tone for the rest of the day. And, obviously I don't do this 7 days a week. For me, my weekends are a little bit less structured and I might do that later in the day, and that's okay. But on a work day, that structure and that routine is very important for me.
Now, I know that I've got two people on the podcast right now who are early morning risers and who love running and who love discipline. To our listeners who may be more like me, who find it difficult to get up early in the morning and sometimes find it hard to get in the zone to do exercise. Nick, do you have any pointers or any impulses for our listeners as to what they could do or try if that doesn't come naturally to them, if there is this, oh, I don't know if I can be bothered to go out for a run, I'm feeling lazy, I would rather lie in. Yes, anything you'd say to them?
It's about frequency and consistency. It's not about distance. It's not about speed. It's something that I talked to my 85-year-old father about.
Mm.
It's not a big deal to get up, put your shoes on, and go for a walk around the block. And if you did that every day, then you'd be moving and you'd be doing something. And gradually, as you feel more comfortable and confident, then you can go further, you can go faster. But that's a personal choice. So for me, it's really about having the discipline to be consistent and having the discipline to give yourself the ability, the freedom to not succumb to the inner voice of, I don't want to do it. It's actually getting out there and doing it, no matter the speed, no matter the effort, no matter the distance, I think is what's most important. So it's about, if you can get into that rhythm, then it becomes habitual.
I absolutely love that. And especially removing the pressure around speed and distance and making it more manageable. 100%. Can you share your second self leadership practice with us? I know you've touched upon time, so perhaps it's something around that or something completely different.
Yeah, well, it actually is time. And it's not only about getting up at 5:15 in the morning. That's specific to me. But I think it's around the fact that time marches on, and I'm slightly obsessed with efficient use of time. You could speak to my family about that as I try to multitask and do many things to actually make my day as efficient and as productive as possible. I have a real sense of doing useful things in my day. For me, that feels fulfilling, and I feel like I am moving forward. And this is very specific to me, but it starts with my morning routine of getting up early, having a coffee, doing something physical, and then preparing myself for my day. And that is very important throughout the day, that I maintain some structure. I know what I'm working on and I'm doing something productive for every minute that I feel like I can. And of course, I am not a robot, so I need moments of downtime. But even within those moments, I've found that I can use those moments productively. There was a moment when I needed a downtime. I don't really watch television, but of course, you start scrolling on bite-sized content on Instagram or something. And sometimes that's interesting and relevant, but other times I actually felt like it wasn't. So now I've taken to, using Duolingo to enhance my Greek skills, which is, you know, I'm plodding along. I can't say I'm very good yet, but it provided the same level of downtime where I was doing something productive. And for me, that felt really, really good and was more authentic to how I like to live my life rather than the dopamine hit that I get from sort of having downtime to do something else, which didn't feel good and didn't make me feel good. So the sense of time and my sense of how I use my time is really important to me. Not always as important to other people. Like my family might not be the same as me, and I accept that. And so for me, it's okay that I go try and do all the things I need to do because it makes me feel fulfilled. I don't need to impose that on other people.
Nick, have you found any preferred ways of structuring your time? I know that some people do it daily, weekly, by hour. Have you found a system, or do you have a preferred way of thinking about how to maximize your efficiency of time?
Well, I think it's a combination of all those things, right? Like I'll give you examples in my personal life. I like to organize and book my holidays long in advance. It makes me feel like I know what's coming up, right? But equally, that's very difficult to do sometimes in a work setting, although you can set goals. You need to sort of maybe think a little bit more medium to shorter term. And so usually by, I don't know, Sunday night, which is fairly typical of people, like I'm planning my week, even if it's only in my head, I need to prepare myself mentally for what I need to do, which means looking at my calendar. And then I do that in the mornings too, around what big items I need to tackle first. And I think this is the other important learning, is that I also realized that some of the hardest things, you should be doing those first thing in the morning. Like I think Ernest Hemingway said, if you're going to eat a toad, do it first thing in the morning. And of course, a lot of quotes are attributed to Hemingway. But the point being, you should, or I should, and I try to do those big, hairy, difficult tasks first thing, and then I can coast through the day. I know I have meetings. I know I have some things I got to accomplish. I write those down. So it's a combination of long, medium, and very short-term planning. And of course, you need to be fluid because there's always things that come up. But I guess if you know your priorities, then you know what you need to focus on, and you won't get distracted, or you'll be able to push things away that aren't important.
That makes sense. You touched on this in the previous question, I believe, and also in this question as well, the importance of downtime, and that can be quite difficult to come by, especially with a family and especially with a busy professional life. Is downtime something that you actively schedule, or do you find that you are more reactive to, as you say, recognizing when you need it and doing it as it arises?
I would say I'm more reactive. I know this sounds weird, but downtime for me is also when I'm going for a run, because that is time for myself. So it's a little bit of a selfish time. There are other moments when I know I need to sleep more, so I will sleep in, for instance. Or there's a moment where I know I need to stop working because I feel like I'm, stuck in a loop, and then I'll give myself that downtime. So I think I am more reactive than structured in my downtime, because I know that my engine is such that, if I can keep going or I'm in a flow, then I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to break that because I've scheduled something that's too rigid.
Makes sense. And one thing that you've touched on in this habit is the ability to prioritize. You touched on that. I like to do the big hairy things first, and this is a question of priorities. Yeah, as a fellow business owner, it can be difficult to prioritize accurately when everything feels important, and it's a skill that I'm really trying to get better at. So, is there anything in particular that you use to help you with this prioritization of what should I work on first?
I think you can look at your life through different lenses. I'm a business person, a colleague, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son. And I think it depends on the context, right? There could be really important personal things that you have to attend to support your family or to support yourself. Or there could be really important work things. I think it's important to understand what is the priority in those situations, because oftentimes we can defer to work and we neglect sort of our personal self. And that comes with a reminder from my family often, and a discussion with my family, my partner, my life partner, my kids, my parents, and remembering that work is temporary and life is as permanent as it is while we're here. So I think it's a balance always, and it's going to be contextual. And I think the only trick I can say is, for me, I mean, I think my life and family always comes before work, in that if there's a priority that's a family priority, that's going to always be a bigger priority than work, because I know work will exist and it's there for a reason, but family, we have precious moments in time with our family, and that's very important.
That's yeah, such wise words, and it goes hand in hand with a follow-up question that I wanted to ask, and that is, you mentioned that you want to do useful things at all times. You mentioned that you want to be productive at all times. And I wanted to ask, what is your definition of useful things?
Hmm. Well, I should say that my origin for this is actually quite morbid, in that I've almost died a few times, and that's due to an allergy that I have that's put me in the hospital. And I know what it's like to have the feeling of fighting for your life, and I feel very blessed to be able to say that I've experienced that, because then I know that time is important, and I've woken up from those experiences feeling very light, and realizing that the stress around me was not important at all, and that it was self-induced. So useful things to me are things that make me feel good, and ultimately that are important in the grand scheme of things. So, for instance, for work, I am somewhat of a completer finisher, so it makes me feel good to finish a task and to move on. And so that's important. For personal life, it's important that I am there for my kids and my wife and my parents for important moments. That's important, and that might mean going to a school to watch my children sing or dance, my young children, or it might mean celebrating a birthday or an anniversary with my parents. So it's about understanding myself and understanding what feels fulfilling for me. For fulfilling in a work sense is like moving things along and progressing, and for family, it's about being in the important moments.
I love that for you, by the sounds of it, useful and fulfilling go truly hand in hand, which is not something we often see in society nowadays.
I hope they do. I hope they go hand in hand. I mean, I guess it goes back to the 3 points of working on things of consequence with integrity and compassion and vitality and energy. So I hope that means that I'm being useful for myself and for the world at large.
Yeah. I really love how you're bringing that together, the big and the small, the philosophy and the actual things that you do day in, day out. And also what you said about Duolingo resonates so deeply. I've been going crazy on Duolingo for the last 900 and something days, and I could never quite explain what it is that that does to me, but it's exactly what you just said. It is downtime that still feels productive and useful. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, Nick. 3 years in, I'm starting to understand why I spend so much time on Duolingo.
I need to follow you, Anna, because you're someone I aspire to be as someone who's multilingual and an excellent orator.
Well, thank you, Nick. That's very kind. Shall we move on to self-leadership practice number 3? I'm curious to hear.
Well, I think these threads are all connected. So my third one is around habits, structure, and discipline. As one of my best friend puts it, because him and I are very similar, you need to be, at least I need to be ruthlessly systematic in how I structure myself. And that's partially that the world's chaotic. You know, as an entrepreneur, it's very chaotic. With young kids, it's chaotic. So I need structure around me to give me the clarity to be able to operate them in a small sense. That means I like to be tidy, because if it's too messy around me, I can't think straight. I think I'm not the only one who has that that affliction. But it also means creating the right moments for habitual progression in my work and personal life, and making sure that those micro moments are structured in a way not as rigid as you might think, but still important enough that if I don't have a system and a structure around me, then I can't operate. So it's really it's about habit, structure, and discipline.
Interesting. Do you document these systems, or are they systems of the mind?
Most of my systems are internalized. I don't write them down per se, but I do track them. So, for instance, Duolingo is a way of tracking your progress on a language, and Strava is a way for me to practice my tracking of any physical endeavors that I'm doing. And I also use friends and to hold me accountable. So it means that I join groups that are around doing work, or around doing sport, or around practicing language or learning about music. And I think all of these things are maybe important checks and balances that I have. Ultimately, I'm very, very competitive, but most of the competition that I feel is with myself. It's not external. And that comes back to everything I do. It's about trying to improve yourself and being competitive, squashing the voices of doubt in your minds so that you can make an impact for yourself, but also externally on the world. And so I guess I don't write all those things down, but I do have a network, a web of ways of ensuring that I'm accountable to myself and that I can compete against myself and the dark urges I have to not be happy and productive in the ways I want to be.
That makes sense. And you've mentioned a few habits and a few systems already throughout the conversation. As you said, there is quite clearly a thread. So I wanted to come at this from a different angle. Is there a habit, or what is the habit or system you feel comfortable enough to share that you think most people would be surprised to hear that you have?
Well, I'll give you a historical example of a habit of a system that I've used. COVID was a really tough time for all of us. And it was tough on my business at the time. You guys were working with us actually at that moment. We were all working together. And what got me through COVID was actually the 6-minute journal and journaling in the mornings and the evenings with positive affirmation about the good things that were in my life. That was an example of something that I did for a period of time, almost a few years, actually. And it helped me focus on the positives when there was a lot of negativity around. So that's maybe one example of a habit forming exercise and a structure that I used to see me through what were actually some pretty difficult, dark times.
Super powerful, the 6-minute journal. Yeah, I also remember actually taking it up during COVID. Yes, in 2020. So yeah, I totally empathize. One thing that comes to me as I listen to you is, it sounds like you're incredibly good at structuring your time and maximizing productivity and making sure that, even small gaps of time that you have, you fill them in ways that are fulfilling. And it's something that I find a real challenge in the sense that, if I've got like 15 minutes here or half an hour there, and I'm kind of like, oh, this is not enough to get into a particular task, then I often end up just wasting that time. Or sometimes my brain goes, oof. There's been so much kind of structured stuff on nonstop that my mind and body just yearn for unstructured downtime that on the one hand I feel I need, and on the other hand feels a bit like, I am not being as productive as I could be. So I'm wondering, do you have any tips and tricks when it comes to those things, both for me and any listeners who empathize with my challenge?
I think a lot of the happiness that I get out of structure is the discipline of it. So the discipline for me is an important aspect of structure and habits. But equally, I mean, like you have to listen to yourself. So you have to give yourself permission to have downtime. And I don't want you to misconstrue my words that I am only doing productive things. A productive thing might be a 20-minute siesta. That's also productive. It's productive for other reasons because it recharges your batteries, but it's still productive. So don't get me wrong, I'm not like constantly moving tasks forward and have a big checklist. I think that there needs to be flex in the system, your own system of self-governance. And so I would say listen to yourself, but equally have discipline because there's a lot of times when I wake up in the morning and I want to lie in bed. But I know out of experience that getting up, going outside, going for a walk always makes me feel good. I never come home feeling worse. I always come home feeling better. So I force myself to get up and have the discipline to do that. And knowing that the dopamine hit that I get at the end is always worth it. I just have to remember that. And if you don't remember that, write it down. Like, oh, last time I did this, I felt good, you know? And so then you can read it and put yourself a post-it note next to your bed and saying, actually, I should get out of bed. So it's that balance of giving yourself permission while also having discipline in moments when actually it's necessary.
What I'm hearing you say, actually, Nick, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that for you, being productive with your time means being intentional with your time, which means intentionally deciding, hey, I'm going to take a siesta now, and I know that that is the best possible thing I could do for myself now, or intentionally pushing through the laziness of getting out of bed, knowing that the rewards of going for that walk will be higher than sleeping in. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it's important to have a bias for action, but that has to do with knowing yourself. So being intentional about the things you're doing is a great way to articulate that. It's not always available to you though, because we have other people that rely on us, we have other meetings scheduled. So sometimes you have to make exceptions. And the intentionality is the fact that you've made a commitment that you're going to follow through, even if that's not what is the best for you at that moment. And that's the give and take I think that we all struggle with in our life, is that we're not alone on an island. We're in a world surrounded by others that have their own needs and wants, and we have to balance these things out.
Absolutely. So intentionality that goes beyond just ourselves, but takes into account the people around us. 100%. Brilliant. So, Nick, what other self-leadership practices do you swear by?
Well, I'm not sure this is a self leadership practice or not, but I have a sense of control in my life, and it's a little bit. The other way to say this is that maybe I'm a control freak, and uh, hence I'm not a great employee, because I always feel like, well, I'm not sure I would do it that way. I would do it differently, and maybe that's what makes me an entrepreneur. I struggled in that when I was trying to conform in banking and having to wear a suit every day, when I felt more affinity to the Silicon Valley cyber hippies. So, in any event, I think control, the idea of having the ability to manifest your own destiny, is something that I think is very important for me. So, and that's maybe an innate trait of mine, but it also is about intentionality that you mentioned earlier. It's about actually having that bias for action where you're leaning in and you're actively doing something. And that gives you control over your situation, because you're doing it. You're not waiting for something else. You're not dependent on others. And for me, I find this very important. One, for my own happiness, but two, propelling. Well, it's part of my understanding of self leadership, is that I know I need that to be happy, I suppose.
Yeah, it makes sense. And one of the common threads I feel like has gone through all of the answers so far, and it goes alongside the intentionality, is self-awareness. Like, you can only act on these things if you're honest enough to look inside and see what's actually there, and what's true. And you've touched on there that there's an innate thing that you have around control. So I wanted to ask the question of, do you remember the time where you decided to actively take more control of your life, or has this been something that you've had forever? Did you discover this trait, and do you remember it, or has it always been there?
I'll give you an example of control and action from my professional life. And actually, it was the first business that I ever started as a teenager. So I was an avid basketball player, and my best friend and I would play basketball everywhere we could against anyone that would take the challenge. And we found that in our area, over the summer, the school board would take all the basketball rims down, because neighbors would complain of noise, because of course we'd probably be playing basketball till all hours of the morning. And we found that to be almost criminal. Imagine kids that all they wanted to do was play in the schoolyard and in the park, couldn't do that anymore. And inevitably, you get into trouble. And we saw that happening with ourselves, but also with others. And mind you, I'm a 16-year-old boy here. So we went to the school board and said, why are you doing this? This is a terrible idea. And they explained that, there were noise issues and complaints. And so we petitioned them, and we went in front of the school board and we explained why it was a bad idea, how it was impacting society and the kids growing up in the city. And we convinced them to give us access to the schools, which were also empty over the summer, and the gymnasiums to run a basketball camp for kids in the inner city. And that was the first business that I ever started. And for that, we had to literally change legislation and get them. We were the first time they'd ever opened up a gym to a third party. We had to start a business. It couldn't be a for-profit business, so it was a non-profit business. We had to get insurance for liability. And I guess I realized early on that if I disliked the way something was, that I could actively go and make a change, and I could make a positive change in the world. And so that was my first business I ever started, and we made money. Actually, we were profitable in a nonprofit way because I got sponsorship, and we were the managers of the nonprofit. But I think that for me made me realize that anything is possible, and all you need to do is have the willingness to try and to actually begin and to start, and to coming back to this self-leadership habit, it's about having the control. You have the power and the control to make change, and so you just need to have a bias for action and actually do it, or at least try to do it, and you'll be surprised at what you can achieve.
100%. Do you have any coping mechanisms for when you come across examples of things that you can't control?
That's probably when I go for a run. Absolutely. I find it frustrating if I don't agree with the way, let's say, the status quo is, and I can't impact it. I think on a macro level, we often deal with this. We see the craziness in the world around us, whether that means, the way the government is reacting or the laws that are being put into place. And I think it's like stress is self-induced. So there's always going to be things around you that you disagree with. And I think it's understanding what you can control and what you can't control, and an acceptance of making a change that will, if you can't control something, you need to change something in your life that will then allow you to feel better about it. So if you don't like the laws in your country and you don't like the way your country's going, you can always move. I mean, there's nothing stopping you in most democratic countries that you could actually leave and go somewhere else where you feel more aligned with the ethics and the morality, as an example. So I do find there's a lot of macro things that happen that are external, that you decide that whether you're going to get stressed about that, or you're going to make a change, or you're going to accept the fact that I can't control this and I'm going to go on with my life and have sort of micro happiness on the things that you're doing.
Very practically speaking, for some of our listeners who are listening to you talk and who hear your story about starting that business aged 16 and changing national legislation and making mountains move, and so they've heard this and they feel super inspired. They want to take more charge. They want to take more control in their lives. What would be the very first thing you'd recommend they do, practically speaking?
I think it's take action. So if you believe in something, take action and actually make a list, start actually addressing the points that you want to address. So if you see something that you believe could be different and better, explain how it can be different and better, and take action. Tell someone. It holds you accountable. I think that's the most important piece. Entrepreneurship is often like that. If you don't take action, nothing will ever happen. And if you expect someone to serve it up to you, it will never happen. And I think for me, it's about that movement forward, that progression, that idea that I'm going to actually put this into practice, put this into reality. So make a list, explain why you think something needs to change or needs to happen, and then take the action to do it, to start. Doesn't matter how small that start is. If that means going out the front door, if that means meeting up with someone to have a discussion about it, take action and put it out into the world. That's the only way that you're ever going to make progress.
And I really like your point around mentioning it to other people as well, just speaking it out, because that already makes it more real and it already gives you a witness and, as you say, an accountability partner. And that is usually not as overwhelming a thing to do as, yes, moving the mountains and so on, but it can be a really important first step. So yeah, I'm feeling inspired to take more control after this conversation. This is great.
I'd also draw a parallel to the running from the first habit, where the advice of starting was exactly the same as this one, right? So like I feel like there is again a common thread through your answers, Nick, of bias toward action. You said this earlier. It was the same with running. You don't have to start with a marathon, start with a walk, start with a short walk and build. You don't have to move mountains in the first 5 minutes. Start with the first action, tell someone about it. There's a parallel there, which I find quite interesting.
100%. Yes. And let's see which parallels our final self leadership practice for today will reveal.
Well, I think the one area that I maybe haven't talked about is my emotional self. And for me, believe it or not, I think to some degree I'm an introvert, but I am also an extrovert. I probably find some balance there. And so I get a lot of emotional strength from connecting to other people. So I think it's important. A part of that is that understanding that I need to go connect and speak and interact with others gives me strength, and it gives me ideas, and it gives me wisdom, and it enables me to be curious. And so I will often go out into the world and force myself to go out into the world to meet people, to meet my friends and network. So it's about emotional strength and the connection to others.
Interesting. When I reflect on the idea of introvert versus extrovert, it feels quite a binary term. I feel like that's often how it's discussed in my experience. Do you feel that you've arrived at this conclusion after exploring it more? Is this something that you've actually actively gone to reflect on to get to this answer? Have you learned this about yourself over time, or is this something that you've always kind of known?
I think it was more intuitive for me. My mother used to say that the phone would always ring, and I would play the interlay, like the interconnector amongst friends. So I would call and find out what someone was doing, and then I would call and find out what someone else is doing, and then I would organize the meetup somehow. So, and this sort of goes along with my professional life. Literally, one of the businesses, the first technology business I started was called Degrees of Separation. And it was about connecting, buyers and sellers of technology products. And so I think I've intuitively sort of always been that person who gets some energy from others, from interacting with others, and inspiration from interacting with others. I think I didn't always recognize it though. And as I've matured over the years, I put that into practice in the type of businesses that I create, the type of professions that I choose, and also the type of communities that I decide to be a part of.
Understood. And you reflected on this habit as being an emotional one for you. So I'm interested to understand, do you have any emotions that you link to when you need to be introvert Nick? And are there any emotions that lead you to feel like you need to be extrovert Nick? Like, are there these moments where there's a time for one and a time for the other?
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm in a flow state and I'm trying to finish something that requires my specific intentional energy and output, I definitely need to be alone. And I don't like interruption. At the same time, sometimes when I feel low on energy or I'm feeling uninspired, it's exactly when I need to go meet other people, because I find my friends and my network in business are very inspirational and are always sparking new ideas in my head when I speak to them about what they're doing. And so I find there are moments of sort of low energy when I know going out sometimes feels like a chore. And then every time I'm out, I know that I come back feeling more energized with new contacts, new opportunities, and new ways of thinking. So it's that curiosity that will help me with the low energy moment versus when I know I need focused energy on output, then I definitely need to be alone and uninterrupted.
Absolutely. I was just thinking when you were explaining that there about the importance of going through this self-leadership journey, because imagine the consequences of getting those the wrong way around. Like if you'd not gone through this journey of self-exploration to arrive at this conclusion, like I reflect on time in my life where I didn't know when I needed to be introvert Josh and when I needed to be extrovert Josh, and like there is a clear danger sometimes of actually getting these wrong, which can lead to burnout, amongst other things, for example. So I think it's really interesting to hear someone else who's arrived at this conclusion reflect on the benefits that it gives, because it feels like quite a potentially small thing, but actually, like you said, the upside of getting it right and knowing when to be which part of you, when to push the right parts of you, so to speak, in the right times, sounds really powerful.
I think it's okay to give yourself permission to not be the extrovert sometimes. Like I
Mm.
signed up, I'm going to go to this thing, I'm supposed to go out to this networking event, and it's okay to give yourself permission not to go. Equally, you need to know the balance of when you need to force yourself to go. So
Yeah.
it always comes down to understanding your own energy levels, understanding your own needs at that moment, which easier said than done, but I think the greater sense you can have, the greater read you can have of your own self, then the better you'll be in those moments of decision.
In terms of the connections that give you the most, do they have any qualities or any characteristics that they share?
Well, I feel like it's similar to how you build a team. Like you want to be around intelligent people that are curious and that generally have good judgment, so aligned with you ethically and morally. And so I think the being around those people and putting yourself in situations where you're around those people that are going to influence you in a proper way, I think are hugely important.
Thanks for sharing, Nick. And in wrapping up, I would like to ask you, do you have any parting words of advice to our listeners?
I think the most important thing is to be your authentic self. Whatever and however that means to you and however you come to that conclusion, the more you can understand yourself and love yourself, then I think the better you'll be in business, in your personal life, and generally the happier you'll be.
Thank you so much for sharing, Nick, and thank you so much for taking the time today to walk us through some of your top self-leadership practices. I know I've taken a lot from this conversation, and I hope so will our listeners. We really hope to have as many of you join next time as well. So thank you so much. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Josh. And till the next time.